So here we see I'm going to go to the MoSafe website, and we've configured reporting right here on the web page. This was really the easiest, um, and so we just used Wix.com and used a password protected page. For security purposes, obviously, I won't disclose what our password is, but we ensure that anyone who is entering data has the access to that password. And so we also use SurveyMonkey, which encrypts the data on their end as well. So here we see our informed consent. We added this in May. And we want to make sure that everyone who is coming into the program for the very first time reads this and generally gets an understanding of what it is. But then each time that the individual checks in or receives services, they'll have to opt into it as well, right? So this basically says who we can share information with, what type of information we're sharing it with. And so I generally like to, just do a summary for our individuals who, sometimes are under the influence or, it's really beholden upon us to be their advocates. So I'm going to fill this out, and this is pretty easy. This will guide you through it. And so today's date would be the 7th. And I'm going to use my birthday. So that would be 7/3 of 79. No, this is not my first time. I consider myself housing stable. Now, sometimes you're going to get individuals who they cannot read without glasses. Maybe they cannot read. And so you want to ensure that you are being very thoughtful when you're asking some of these questions. Here's one a question that can jam people up. We don't want to assume what a person identifies as. What gender do you identify as? That's a better question than saying, do you identify as male, right? So that's kind of a loaded question. I do identify as male. My HIV status is positive. So again, what is your HIV status is a different question than do you know your HIV status. Here's one. Do you know, what is your hepatitis status? And many people will say unknown. What race or ethnicity do you identify as? So Caucasian. I am 38. I am off supervision. I have been on it during my life. And I identify as gay. Again, this is something that if you're in an area where you're using an iPad, you want to ensure that people have the privacy to be able to fill this out in a safe manner without judgment. This question is, have you used Narcan on another person since your last visit? And we want to identify, this is really helping us to identify whether people are engaging EMS or not. So no, I have not used Narcan, and since I have not, then this question is NA. Here we're starting to look at some health comorbidities, and so we want to know if they have any of these diagnoses. Pretty broad: diabetes, heart disease, a mental health diagnosis, an infection that could be anything from endocarditis to a blood infection, or none of the above. And then they also have the option to add other. I will say yes. And so we also want to evaluate the substances that people are using. So I would say this, and let's say this. And so sometimes people who smoke regularly, they don't identify that as a substance, right? A drug. This is important when we start looking at future funding options. Part of the whole nonprofit and programmatic world is you really need to capture the data now for use in the long term. And this was a pretty important point that was brought home during the Southern Harm Reduction Conference. My friend Kiefer Patterson will say it quite often. You don't want to get a year down the road and wish you would have collected the data. Take the time, do it right. It's not always going to be perfect, but data gathering is really a moving target. So engage academics, engage other individuals who've been doing the work, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This was a very interesting question. Have you performed sex work in the last 90 days? This was really intended to identify individuals who they themselves are a sex worker. But what we found out pretty quickly was that men who have paid for sex will answer yes to this. So at first we were like, well, this is really not what we intended. But actually, it's turning out that it's helping us to identify both parties who are engaged in sex work, right? So both of these individuals are really at risk, whether it's the John or the person who is performing the sex act themselves. Let's say decline to answer. Here we're seeing where is a person living when they're not using, and then where are people going when they use. So we want to see the migration patterns. At this point, we tell the individual to let staff know whenever it gets to this point. And this is all internal. So we want to know how much our Narcan's going out. So we distribute IM, intramuscular Narcan, and then nasal. One complete pack would be 2 doses. We do the tip preference. So we distribute longs and shorts, longs being the 1/2 inch, shorts being the 5/16. Is the individual returning syringes? And then the way we use this is my initials. So AL, and then I identify as male, 0703. And then today I will have received supplies, referral, let's say, and safer sex. And then we want to identify where have we engaged this individual. So have we engaged them at the center? Have we engaged them out on mobile outreach? Is this a mobile delivery? So and that's very different from outreach. But we want mobile outreach where we're doing cold contacts. A mobile delivery might be for individuals that are homebound, or they have extreme challenges to being able to travel to us. So typically we're going to put them on a mobile route. So let's say this was a mobile delivery. We'll hit OK, and that will be done. The good thing about this is you can access this on a handheld device or an iPad or on a computer, and it's pretty much that simple. If you have any questions about the way we capture our data, please feel free to send me an email, Aaron Laxton at mosafe.org. That's AARON LAX, T as in Tom, ON, at mosafe.org, and I will be glad to help you. Be sure to check out our website, www.mosafe.org. Thanks to the Elton John AIDS Foundation and AIDS United for making the syringe access program possible through funds provided by the SAF. Thank you.